why do some Chelsea fans hate Mason Mount so much? First of all, right, it's a good title, isn't it? It is a good title. Second of all, yes, you guys know I'm a QPR fan. It's been there the whole time, and I talk about all teams and interesting things that I find interesting. So if you're a Chelsea fan and you're going to get annoyed by me here, I get it. But honestly, I do try my very best, especially when we're talking about on-the-field stuff, to try and keep bias out of it all. I was on Twitter the other day, and first of all, someone disagreed with my thoughts on Saturday Social, where I was talking about João Felix, who I rate as a player, but I just don't think is a good purchase in terms of an on-loan signing. In that clip, I say, look, you've got other players on the left-hand side. You've got players like Mason Mount. And I got several messages from people going, how on earth can you defend Mason Mount? And I was really surprised. So I then sort of tweeted saying, like, have Chelsea fans given up on Mason Mount? And it was a real mix. There were some that were saying that's just Twitter. There was others saying, yeah, he's useless and he just gets defended. Bottom line is Mason Mount has been drawing loads of criticism lately. And in this video, we're going to take a look at who is right. The people slating him or the people defending him. If you enjoy this one and you think it's an interesting talking point, you want me to do more of these kind of things that I spot on Twitter, let me know by hitting the subscribe button and, of course, hitting the like button as well. Let's have a like target for this one. 3k likes. Let's see if we can hit that. So with 3 goals, 2 assists and 2 big chances created in his 20 Premier League appearances this season, Mason Mount's form has definitely tailed off from what we've seen in the past. Other areas of his game have also severely dropped off, with Mason Mount taking less shots, creating less chances, and also having lower passing accuracy this season compared to all his previous seasons in Chelsea colours. There is definitely something off with Mason Mount at the minute, and that happens with footballers, right? His general performances have also waned, and it's got many questioning what he actually offers on the pitch for Chelsea. So for the most part, he's been used on the left side this season, and that generally isn't a natural position for him, as he hasn't got the pace that you'd require from a left-sided attacker. But it's not his fault that he's been played there, and with the injuries in the squad for Chelsea this year, Chelsea didn't have much option in terms of putting him out on that left-hand side before Mudryk's arrival. But with Mudryk now in the team, Mason Mount could be deployed in a different position, deployed in the centre of midfield like he did against Fulham. But in that game, he still struggled. He made no key passes, no dribbles, successful dribbles, and he was only making 24 accurate passes during the game. That's 77%. All pretty terrible stats. Well, definitely terrible stats. And it seems that this could well be the performance that has caused the biggest upset yet amongst Chelsea fans. And the problem is, in a midfield three of Enzo Fernandez, Gallagher and Mount, it's Mount that should be the creative spark, and he simply hasn't been creative or progressive enough in his application this season, nor in that Fulham match in particular. And for England, there are also some similar criticism with other players seen as more technically reliable options and are perceived to be better creators than Mason Mount. The parallels between Potter and Southgate seem quite evident too, with both managers clearly having an affection for Mount, although of course Tuchel did as well, as did Frank Lampard. Which has actually, I think, made the situation worse for Mount as well. And he's often got that sort of perception as sort of manager's son kind of vibe, and which is unfair, I think, in my opinion, because to see diligence as a weakness feels a little bit harsh for me, but it is something that does get thrown around often. For those who aren't aware of this, saying it's basically a way of saying that he's being picked because the manager likes him rather than being picked on merit. But he is consistently picked under any manager that he plays for. So there has to be something about him and his previous season's stats that do demonstrate that there's a good player in there. A player that's won Player of the Season twice. Let's talk about the contract situation, because that's another thing that is irking, I think, a lot of Chelsea fans. Mount is currently valued at £70 million on Transfer Market, but his contract is up in 2024, so this leaves Chelsea in a sticky space if they want to get rid. With contract negotiations rumoured to now be on hold due to his form, it could develop into a bit of a saga here, and something that I think is going to rumble on for a while, because Mount is currently on 75k a week, which means that he isn't even in the top 20 earners at Chelsea. But with how much he features for Chelsea and how much of a consistent part he has played in the starting 11s over the last few years, whether you like it or not, he's understandably going to want a contract that reflects that. And his agent wouldn't be doing his job or her job, don't know who it is, if they weren't pushing for big money from a club that's got big money and has spent big money. And with Chelsea now doling out huge contracts, it's very difficult for them to be in a strong position when negotiating with Mount's representatives. Fabrizio Romano has stated that the contract negotiations may take months to get sorted, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I can understand why Chelsea fans are getting annoyed, but again, if you strip it back for a second, are you expecting him to play for free, or are you going to be realistic here and go, look, this guy's going to obviously want to make as much money as he can, like all footballers and all professionals in any walk of life want to do. Some Chelsea fans have made it clear that they have a problem giving Mount that kind of money based off his performances in the last 6 months. That I can kind of get. You know, it's sort of a catch-22 for Chelsea because they want to tie down their valuable assets, obviously, or they risk losing Mason Mount in the summer for a fraction of what his market value is. But if they do give him a bumper contract, there is no incentive then for Mount to leave, and clubs will also find it not a viable option because you're going to have to pay him those same wages. I also said at the start of the video that there could be this hint of English bias. That's something that's been kind of labelled at, I don't know if it's labelled at me, but labelled at some Chelsea fans. And there's a couple of ways you can look at that one. And again, it comes down to your perception of it. Let me know in the comments, because I think this is a really interesting element of it. As a fan, a global fan, so let's say a fan who's not from the UK or Ireland, do you give English players more leeway or credit, or are you harder on them? I'd be really intrigued to know how people feel about that one. I think you probably do give them a bit more leeway. And I think I could imagine if I was an American fan, I'd see this sort of critique that Pulisic gets, for example. You would be frustrated when Mount gets away with it just because he's English. What I would say to that, my rebuttal would be, I don't think it's actually about him being English. I think it's about him being a homegrown player who's been there since he was super, super young, made his way through the ranks. And I don't actually see a problem with that, because I think sometimes you have to just be certain of someone's integrity and intentions. And I think those young players that come through, okay, they might not be capable, that's one thing. But to sort of suggest that someone's not trying their best, I think it's okay as a football fan to give that slight percentage of leeway towards those kind of players. But maybe I'm wrong. Let me know how you feel about that one in the comments down below. I think also when it comes to critique to Mason Mount, he had a poor World Cup. That World Cup was in the middle of a season. You then get straight back to it. And maybe those England fans are going, oh, he didn't do it for England, and now he's not doing it for Chelsea. So there's two ways of spinning it. Let's compare him to another player here, Mateo Kovacic. He has played less games than Mount this season, but has also been really average and has been contributing less than Mount. Yet he escapes that criticism due to the spotlight not being on him as bright as someone like Mason Mount, who is, again, one of their own, probably one of their brand assets, a bit of a franchise player for them. The comparison that I would look at, though, is Marcus Rashford. Mount is currently 24, and that is the exact age that Rashford was when he was at his lowest. The argument against this, I guess, would be that Rashford has more natural talent and was always going to come good. That is certainly not what people were saying 6 months ago. Recency bias is rife in situations like this. Mount can do things with the ball that not many other players can, but the poor form is what everyone is choosing to focus on, and I understand it. But the key word here is form. His talent never diminishes, it's purely the form. If you take a step back and look at the whole situation at Chelsea, there are loads of players that you can point at who are underperforming. Kovacic, Havertz, Aubameyang, and Pulisic, who's injured at the moment but has still been pretty poor this season. They have all had bad seasons for the level of talent that they possess. This is no excuse for Mount's poor performances, but the Chelsea team as a whole aren't in any gear at the moment. Not, you could pick a gear. They're not moving. There is no cohesion. It's not like Chelsea are battering everyone with Mount doing absolutely nothing. So to blame Mount in particular at every opportunity, that feels a little bit harsh, and it feels like a misuse of frustration. That said, look, as a football fan, when you get frustrated, and it is exhausting, and you want to lash out. But I think the intentions of Mason Mount are always really, really strong, and he's not a bad player, is he? There's no way. It feels like there's a lot of new, shiny things. And I can understand why you want to swap them in. And whilst the cohesion isn't there, I think dropping him, that's one option. And I think sometimes that can create a bit of a reset. But to think that Mason Mount isn't good enough for Chelsea or for the top sides in this division, I think is ignoring how brilliant he has been at a really young age for quite a long time. So what next for Mount? Graham Potter has consistently used Mount this season, but with the criticisms coming Mount's way, he may take him out of the firing line, which is what a lot of Chelsea fans have said. Now, and I will, address this once again. There are a lot of Chelsea fans that don't hate him, that do want him to be a part of Chelsea for a long, long time. But there are a lot that don't. I think if Mount fails to perform from now until the end of the season, and Chelsea continue with this, with a ruthless approach when it comes to signing new players, he faces being replaced in the summer. That is just a reality. But the funny thing is, if you look around the league, I'm pretty sure that most teams would take Mount and they'd get a tune out of him as well. For example, Liverpool have been linked with him, and I think, wow, he would be a brilliant fit for him in terms of the intensity that he has off the ball and the work rate that he offers and the ability to work within a team and show vision at times. Again, I understand that that's not really happening at the moment, but again, I think that's down to the collective. There's no cohesion there. There's no understanding of pattern of play really for Chelsea right now. And I think Mount could even be a brilliant signing for Newcastle as well. But regardless of form, I don't think Mount will be short of offers if Chelsea do dither over a new contract for him. So in summary, who is in the wrong here? With all football-related debates, there's often a side A and a side B, and there's not much in between. On one side, the Mount criticism, I think, is justified due to the stats. They are very average performances coming from him. But I lean towards the other side. And I do not get why he's being singled out in what is a hugely underperforming Chelsea squad this year by the expectations that they set at the start of the season and with the players that have been accumulated within that squad. I think it's really over the top. I think the intensity of the way he's being hounded feels really harsh, and I think he's been a really good player for Chelsea up until this season. And with Chelsea in a transitional phase and struggling on the pitch, it just feels really unfair to criticise a single player more than others, even if they have stunk out the place on a few occasions. And Mason Mount has done that. But these guys aren't robots. They're humans. And I think if the output's been here for a really long time and then it dips here, if it stays there for, a similar amount of time, then fair enough. He might have lost it. But I think you've got to give him a second. That's just my opinion. Chelsea fans, again, I'm not tarring you all with the same brush. It's just a really good title at the start of it in terms of saying you guys hate him. But at the same time, it does feel sort of like a 50-50 split right now. So let me know how you're feeling in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button and check out this video.
I see your hair and I think, oh, it couldn't really hurt. Could it? A little smooch with James?
This is the greatest day of my entire life. It's incredible.
The day is breaking, and so is my pledge to heterosexuality. It's gorgeous. You're like a young Montgomery Clift. Look it up.